Hey, and welcome to The Explainer. You know how you're always retelling stories and you have to report what somebody else said? Well, today we're going to break down the art of that. We're diving into direct and indirect speech so you can seamlessly weave someone else's words into your own.
So just look at these two sentences for a second. On the left, you've got the exact words Nisha spoke, right there in quotation marks. On the right, it's a report of what she said. See the differences? That small but really logical shift between the two? Well, that's the key to everything we're going to explore today.
All right, so here's our game plan. First up, we'll get crystal clear on the difference between quoting someone and just reporting what they said. Then we're going to hit the 3 biggest changes you need to know to switch between them. After that, we'll get into how to handle questions and commands, and we'll wrap it all up with the more expressive stuff, like wishes and exclamations.
Okay, let's get started with the absolute fundamentals. What's really going on when we talk about direct versus indirect speech?
Think of direct speech like hitting record. You are capturing someone's exact words, word for word. It's like a journalist quoting a source. Those quotation marks you see are basically a signal that says, hey, this is precisely what was said, nothing's been changed.
Now, indirect speech, you might also hear it called reported speech, is more like telling a story. You're not playing back a recording, you're just sharing the main idea, the substance of what was said. Honestly, this is how we talk most of the time, right? We focus on the message, not the exact words.
So, how do we make that switch from a direct quote to a reported story? Well, it's a process with a few key steps. First, you drop the quotation marks. Then, you usually add a little connecting word like that. After that, the big crucial changes happen. Pronouns have to shift perspective, verb tenses usually take a step back in time, and finally, any words about time and place need an update so it all makes sense. Let's break those down.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to focus on the 3 most important changes that really make this whole thing work. First up, the biggest rule of them all, the tense shift. And it's not just a random rule. Think about it. By the time you're reporting what someone said, the original speaking already happened, right? It's in the past. So to keep everything logical, the verb tense also needs to take one step back into the past.
And what's really cool is that this isn't random at all. There's a super clear, logical pattern to this back-shifting. Just look at the table. See how each tense takes one clean step backward? Simple present becomes simple past. Present continuous becomes past continuous. Once you see that pattern, you can pretty much apply it to any sentence.
Let's see it in action. Mary says, "This is a good book." When we report it, that present tense is takes one step back to become the past tense was. Mary said that was a good book. See? Simple and clean.
And this same logic works for modal verbs too. A promise about the future, like I will buy, just shifts to its past tense version when you report it. She would buy. It's that same one-step-back principle at work. But there is one time you break the rule, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it. If someone states a universal truth, like a scientific fact that's always true, the tense doesn't change. Why? Because the truth itself hasn't moved into the past. Trees purified the air yesterday, they do it today, and they will tomorrow, so the verb just stays put in the present. Okay, on to our second major change, pronouns. This one is all about perspective. When you report what someone else said, the pronouns have to shift to match your perspective as the new speaker.
And here is a perfect example of that shift. The teacher says you because she's talking directly to Swami. But when we report it later, we're not the teacher. We're an observer talking about Swami. So to match our point of view, you has to become he.
And the third big change you have to watch out for involves words that anchor a statement in time and place. You know, words like here, now, today, or tomorrow. These also have to be updated so the whole thing still makes sense. You can think of this table as your cheat sheet for keeping the context logical. I mean, if someone says, I'll meet you here tomorrow, and you retell that story a week later from a different city, well, here and tomorrow don't work anymore, right? Do they? Here has to become there, and tomorrow becomes the next day to keep the timeline and location consistent for your listener. So we've pretty much got statements down, but what happens when we need to report questions or even commands? Well, the same basic principles apply, but with a few new tricks. First, a quick pro tip that trips a lot of people up. When do you use say versus tell? The rule is actually really simple. You use tell when you mention the person who was listening. For example, Anita told me. If you don't mention the listener, you just use say, as in Anita said. It's a handy little distinction.
All right, so with that out of the way, how do we take a direct question and turn it into a reported one?
It actually breaks down into 3 simple steps. First, you switch your reporting verb to something like asked or wondered. Second, and this is the key, you change the word order from a question back into a regular statement. Why? Because you're not asking the question anymore. You're just reporting that a question was asked. And finally, for simple yes or no questions, you introduce them with if or whether.
Now let's watch all our rules come together in this one example. First, the reporting verb changes to asked. Next, look at the word order. The question, why did you miss, flips back into a statement, why he had missed. And in that one little flip, you can see the tense shift and the pronoun change. And finally, our time word yesterday gets updated to the previous day. It all just flows together. Okay, for our last section, let's look at how we report some of the more emotional or expressive kinds of speech, like commands, exclamations, and suggestions.
For commands, we do something a little different. We report the command by changing the main verb to its infinitive form, the to form of the verb. So the direct command, shut the window, becomes the reported action, asked me to shut the window.
And with exclamations, the real trick is to report the emotion behind the words. You can't really report a word like, yay! So instead, you describe the feeling, they shouted in excitement, and then you just report the rest of the sentence using the rules we've already learned.
And there you have it. That's the complete toolkit for mastering reported speech. Now that you understand the logic behind all these changes, here's a final question for you. Where do you think you'll notice it first? Will it be in a news report quoting a politician, a novel describing a character's conversation, or will you just catch yourself doing it in your very next chat? Keep an ear out for it.